if I can only use one word of what our mantra should be for the 21st century, it would be enough. Just enough. Enough for everybody in a sense of sufficient, but also enough and not above this. Why is it that despite our unprecedented innovative capabilities, we keep having the same problems of persistent poverty and social unrest and conflict, resource scarcity, pollution, disease? Why does this keep coming back? We had the annual global risks report of the World Economic Forum come out today that actually said, well, based on our analysis of how our risks interconnect in our global system, we have about 2 years before we reach irreversible tipping points. It's whether or not we maintain our current levels of welfare or if they go down. If we want to maintain them, we have to redefine our core values and paradigms. It's just a little bit greener, a little bit more of the ESG is not going to cut it. We are out of time, certainly now, for that. Now, limits to growth forces upon us the question, who do we want to be and what world do we want to live in? This is not a question that's been explored much because it was a ridiculous question to ask for most of human history, because we never had that power. But now we do. And so we get to shape our own destiny. And we haven't really thought this question through much. And we're running out of time to come up with a good answer. Capitalism has been reinvented in history, and we can invent it again, because ultimately, not to go too much Yuval Harari, but it's just a story that we use to collaborate together, and we can change that story. So you see this around the world, that the majority of people are aware that we're approaching tipping points, that what we're doing is unsustainable, and they want deep systemic changes, and not just any systemic changes. They want these things of prioritizing health, well-being, and the planet, which is basically what society does in a stabilized world scenario. There's a misconception that well-being is hard to measure. It's not straightforward, but it's actually not harder than economic activity. This idea that the GDP is a neutral number is simply not true. It's not that good a measure of economic performance at all. The one who actually invented it, Kuznets, also said that at the time. He said, I don't think this is a good measure. It should not be used for measuring economic performance, but the world just went with it. But really, you want to go beyond that, and you want to go to net positive. So companies are exploring ways to go from this short-term growth pursuit towards sustainability and lasting prosperity. But then really, ultimately, the goal is to give back more than you take, to be a truly regenerative force and be a positive long-term impact, right? And so that's the kind of shifts that I see in corporations. So lastly, to optimally confuse you before we go into the Q&A, this is the last slide that I want to leave you with. And I have contributed to this book as well. This is The Earth for All from the Club of Rome. They came out with it last year, so exactly on the 50th anniversary of the original Limits to Growth. What it came down to was basically, well, okay, so you didn't listen 50 years ago. So we're out of time for a smooth transition, which is a shame, because if the message had been heeded at that time, it could have been more smooth. But since we're now running out of time, it's arguably the biggest challenge. And so they produced a new analysis with a new system dynamics model to identify leverage points in the system. No system is random, which means there are certain points where there is more influence if you work on those specific points than in others. And so the last leverage point is empowerment, particularly of women. Women are just a leverage point. Who knew that not leveraging the insights of half the population can give us suboptimal results? I don't know. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. And so with that, I conclude this presentation, and looking forward to discussing some more with you.